registration, there were 6 people registered. And they said 7 is the cutoff, otherwise we have to cancel the course. So I twisted Estelle's arm and she joined. Then I talked to Elaine and Ram and they said, oh yes, we were thinking of coming anyhow. Then I talked to Miles, he said, I'll come, but I don't have a ride. So I said to Krishna, Krishna, he needs a ride, so he got roped into coming. Of course, Brenda's married to Larry. Jim I roped in from Socrates Cafe, and Bob, I refused to play tennis with him unless he joined. And he said, I'll come for 5 minutes, and he stayed. This is called chain migration. We need it. We need it.
On my own.
Yes. This is a course on wisdom. What is it? Where do we find it? And in previous lectures, now some of you may be wondering, well, we missed the first 2. My friend Rami is here. Don't worry, we'll catch up. Everything will be just fine. Relax. So in the first course, we had talked about, Larry had contextual wisdom. So there's this story of Barbara Walters who goes to Afghanistan and she sees that these women are walking 5 paces behind their husband. It's that kind of community. So she talks to them and she gives them this whole thing on women's rights. And they say, yes, you got it. A year later, she comes back and she sees the women are still walking. So she said, why? They said, landmine. This is contextual wisdom. Now we associated wisdom with many different things. Normally in the West we associate wisdom with knowing what is true. So we have to have a clear apprehension of truth, knowing what is good, so there is value. It is associated with justice. Good judgment. It's associated with action. It's associated with words like sagacity and discernment. It is associated with insight. We go to people when there is a dilemma, we don't know what to do, and we say, oh, let's go to such and such a person, and that person looks at it both sides and comes up. Estelle gave the example of Solomon's story, where 2 mothers are fighting over the baby, and Solomon summons a soldier to cut in half, and of course the real mother says, no, don't do it, and So that's an example of creativity. At a party, there were 2 couples. One was a younger couple, about 5 or 6 years married. Another was a couple that had been married about 50 years. And the wife of the younger couple says, look at that older couple, look at that husband, how much love there is. The husband is always saying to the wife, darling, sweetheart, and honey bun, and so on. So this younger guy goes up at some point to the older husband and says to him, my wife is saying 5, 6 years, not that much passion left, and you are still saying, super emotional. He says, well, since you asked, I'll tell you the real reason. About 4 or 5 years ago, I forgot her name. So this is creativity. I love tattoos. I'm thinking just
fresh coffee.
Thank you. So I'm thinking just to prepare myself for the future of getting a tattoo, Estelle, I can get her name, I say, hi, Sugar Bush. Can you believe it? Yes. Or should I say, we talked about the qualities needed to learn wisdom. You remember that? So one of the qualities that we had said was Shraddha. You remember that word? Oh, I didn't write it in the glossary. It means open-mindedness. Last time, when you exercised, Cora and others had said, listen. Remember that? Listen. Listen was really, Bob had said, ask, that's a question. And I think Elaine had said, receive. So this sequence of listening and asking questions and receiving the answers back and being open to it. I think somebody had said, maybe it was Barbara, said, being in the moment being receptive to what's going on. This idea of Shraddha is essential for wisdom, because if our minds are not open, if we are coming at everything with a whiteboard that's got so much written on it, nothing new can go in. Right? So this is very, very important. Very open mind is needed. The thing that pulls us back from an open mind is ego. We have a certain identity. I know this for certain, and I'm going to wrestle everybody into the ground until they agree with me. This is the normal dinner conversation. But on the other hand, children have an open mind. Jaya knows. By the way, my daughter Jaya and Nate, did I already introduce you or not? No. Okay, they're here. Her boyfriend Nate, they're here. Chain migration, actually. So we have a friend, old family friends, who has a grandchild by the name of Xander. So Xander's mother, when Xander was about 5 years old, brought home a little puppy from a friend. They were dog sitting. And she had to explain that during the 3 weeks of the dog's stay, the puppy had to go to puppy school. So she said to Xander, just like you have to go to school, the puppy has to go to school. So Xander says, are the teachers dogs? It makes sense. See, now this is what this illustrates. I know it's sort of funny, but it sort of illustrates the openness. Oh yeah. He has to go to school? Yes. Doesn't fight. Why does the dog have to go to school? No, okay. Well, and the next question, clarifying question. Not a devil's advocate, what do you call it? Devil's advocate question, but a question which just clarifies. Are the teachers dogs? Reasonable question, I think. Right? And then whatever the mother says, Xander is willing to accept. This idea of openness is essential for learning wisdom. The other idea, of course, is satsang. Do anybody remember what that is? Satsang, S-A-T, which is truth. Sang is company. Company of people who want to know the truth. This is a satsang. The company of people who are curious about what wisdom is, what is truth, what is life. People who are curious about it and who are willing to listen, who are willing to accept it. It is a little bit like a potluck of ideas. So in a potluck, everybody brings a dish. Everybody samples everybody's dish. Isn't that true? So the bringing the dish, the cooking the dish part is sharing your ideas. The sampling part is listening to what, absorbing with an open mind what other people are saying. But if you look at most discussions, that's not how they go. People bring a dish, they only eat their dish, they insist everybody else eat their dish. Isn't that true? So everybody's cooking, nobody's eating. This is the average dinner conversation. That's the average discussion. Not so in Socrates Cafe, which you've been to, my friend Jim has been to. which you can go to in Selby Library on Wednesdays. Let me see how much time. I may have gone. Okay, another 3-4 minutes. Another quality that we associated with wisdom was humility. Do you remember that? Because without humility, we have this ego interfering. You remember that story about the man who got a medal for humility and then they had to take it away because he wore it? You remember that? The reason I'm telling you the stories are obviously so you can remember the point. So you remember that? So humility. But it is not as if all these concepts are out of our lives. They're very much a part of our life. So the other day I was with Miles, and the question of came up. I mentioned to him that Ravi is going to Jamaica. He said to me that he knows Jamaica. In fact, he had been in the middle of Jamaica as a Peace Corps volunteer for a couple of years, places where even Jamaicans don't go. Now, I've known Miles for a long time. Never mentioned it. What is that? Humility. Humility causes a certain attraction. It causes people to a kind of a like-kind attraction. My friend Ravi. Now, he and his wife, Jeannie, have such a big heart when they share everything. He's responsible for Estelle and I living in Longboat Key. And we were reluctant, and he said, well, why don't you come and live here for a winter? Which is what we did. Share it. During Hurricane Sandy, he's got a big generous house in New York. They took in a whole bunch of people, and they just gave them shelter. Ginny was making shrimp scampi for them. Most people didn't want to leave. I think it's such a big house, I think 2 or 3 might still be there. What does that create? It creates a certain attractiveness to the personality. The other day, Larry and I and Ravi were sitting at lunch at the club here, right? And this lady, gray-haired lady, must be 15 years older than Ravi, came up to him and smoothed his hair. And she said, I just had to do it. No, this is, I'm making this up. No, it happened, right? I witnessed it. She came in, and her husband went, why? That was just an excuse. What did it connect? This is not the only time this happened. We were at Florida Studio Theater. I was standing with Estelle and Ravi, and this lady, very good-looking lady, comes up to him and says, I gotta smell your cologne. This is true. She didn't want to smell the cologne. I mean, she may have thought she wanted to smell the cologne. This attractiveness. So we're going to get into all those things in a little while. But before I get into it, I'm going to bring to you my co-teacher, who has been invited to speak in 92 countries. Next month he's going to be in Moscow, but today he's here to share his story.
You really missed your calling. You would be an opening act.
You're a really excellent opener.
It's hard to compete with that. I try. It's a great opening. So, in about half an hour or 40 minutes, I'd like to talk about 2 main subjects today that I think we'd find interesting and have it more grounded. That's what we agreed that the second 2 talks we gave, Philippe and I both, would be more about actions in the world rather than the theories of wisdom. Philippe gave a nice summary, actually, of some of the points we had made of what wisdom is. So the first thing I think sort of interesting is, can you teach wisdom? Not teach what the word says, and not teach about wise people, can you teach people to be wise? Can you teach them why they should be wise? Can you teach them what happens when they're not wise? I was telling you this morning, it's fairly easy to teach what happens when you're not wise because you just live in this country. You just see it in front of your eyes. But yesterday's New York Times, just how relevant these subjects are. On campus, computer science departments find a blind spot, ethics. Now, how can ethics be a blind spot if it's central to how you live? How would you know what to do, how to act well, how to do well? Blind spot. They don't teach it in any computer science department. They don't teach it in any department as far as I can tell. But it's just right. It's fascinating. So, for years, I did some work at the Harvard Business School. They gave a class in ethics. And I wasn't a professor, I taught the exec ed programs and did research. So I wondered, what's ethics? I was so curious, so I sat in on one of the lectures, and there's a very nice man talking about the need for ethics and all. You just knew, I mean, if you had an iota of sensitivity or understanding, that those students couldn't care less. This is an easy A, they just took it and they got it. It had no effect on their life. They were there to make a great deal of money. I'm not so much against that, but it had no effect on them. I guess Harvard did this to satisfy the liberal arts professors who didn't like the business school. Quite literally, I think that's what it was. That had no effect on anything. And teaching ethics in that way. So what do you do? It's a very interesting issue, isn't it? About 10 years ago, I was asked by this company, the IBM of Japan, is a company called Fujitsu, a very good company. They put on their board of directors a Japanese professor named Jiro Nonaka, who was a fellow I sort of learned a lot from, of my own. And he told them, he says, you really should teach your executives about wisdom, which is not a word you hear in Japanese. They don't use that word that much. But since they revered him, they said, yes, we'll do that. So he said, ask Larry Prusak to come and give a class. This letter from Japan saying, would you come and teach us about wisdom? You're a wise country. I mean, you don't need me for this, but I did it because I like going to Tokyo. And I said, how do you teach them about how, I mean, we could do what we're doing here. This is what the word means, da, da, da. But I knew in some ways that's just rhetoric, it's just talking. So we did some interesting things. I tried talking to other people about how you could do this, and 10 years ago, no one talked about this. This was really it's like speaking in Sanskrit or Aramaic or something, dead language, almost dead language. But one of the things someone did suggest to me was have people talk about people they think are wise in their life, not just the Gandhis and Mandelas and Lincolns and so forth, but people they know who they would call wise. And that's it. Why were they wise? Why are you saying they were wise? Your grandmother, an uncle, a neighbor. And I don't know if any of you have done work in Japan. They're very reluctant to speak out. They're very polite. So I had to sort of really encourage them, and then I just said, you have to do this. Naka-san said you have to do things. And they started talking about, it was so touching, about people in their lives. And I said, why were they wise? And it was very moving. I'm sorry I didn't record it myself. So it's a very interesting way of teaching people. Then you say, well, do you aspire to be that way? Is this a model for you to act? And they said, yes, it is. It had a great influence on my life. And again, thinking, one of the best ways to sort of imbue wisdom in our lives is to use the word. Voltaire said no one would fall in love if they hadn't heard the word. There's some truth to that. We don't act if we don't have language for something, you don't act on it. It sounds odd, but there's a whole gigantic amount of linguistic theory behind this. I'm not going to bore you with Edward Saper and people like that, but people don't do things if they don't have words for it. And there's a global conversation that goes on in the world today. Because of technology, because of the integration of certainly at least India and China into the global flow of things, there's a global conversation. Philippe and I were talking that if we could possibly get the word wisdom into that conversation, we both feel our life work, we would
Yeah.
consider it something really worth doing.